men are simple.
Yes.
We're simple. We're easier to satisfy than women. And women, you could buy them a house. They want a bigger house. They want another house. They want to redecorate the house. It's always something. Alrighty, welcome to the Father Factor Podcast. I'm your host, Byron Ricks. I'm here today with my co-host, Josh Wambrot, and my other co-host, Brandon. What do you call yourself these days?
You know, just you can just call me B.
Okay, just call him B. Alrighty, welcome everyone. This is a great day to broadcast. We have a great topic today, and we're going to chop this up. For those of you that are new, the Father Factor Podcast is about talking about fathers and their responsibilities. I say that all your kids are equally yours. I wrote a book called Searching for Dad, 9 Side Effects of Growing Up Fatherless and How to Overcome Them. Because mothers get a lot of attention and adoration, and they deserve it. But fathers don't get what mothers get. On Mother's Day, you can't find a reservation in a restaurant. But Father's Day, you can eat anywhere you want to.
Anywhere you want. Anywhere.
But what I'm saying to dads and men and boys who grew up without fathers, that fathers are important. And then I've learned on this journey that I wrote the book, I think, about 8 years ago, and I wrote it for boys and men, boys who grew up without fathers and men who are fathers but yet not playing the father role, and mothers who are raising boys without fathers. But what I learned is daughters need fathers too. Mm-hmm. They need fathers as much as their brothers do. And so now when I talk about the father factor, it's not just about what boys need, it's about what children need from their dad, the nurturing, the love, the affection, the attention, etc., etc., etc. Today our topic, though, is about moms, about moms, in that the topic is happy wife, happy life. We hear that often. Happy wife, happy life. And so is that a myth? Is that the mindset, or is that a marriage goal?
A marriage goal, no.
Definitely not a goal.
What do you think?
Oh, me? Oh, man. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of hate on this one. I
there's no good answer on this one.
I believe the best answer from my experience, what I've researched talking to people, is summarized simply like this. Boys are taught how to treat women or girls growing up, right?
Okay.
But not taught how to be treated by girls or women.
Okay.
And then women or girls are taught how to be treated by boys or men, but not how to treat them. So I think that's oftentimes we've been prepared. Right, we've been prepared to, from a young age, to care for women. And we should, right? We should look out for them. But what preparation has been done for the females and when it comes to the males?
Okay. You know, I was exploring this topic, and it says here, exploring the phrase, happy wife, happy life, is it cultural, cliche, or a deeper truth about emotional connection, mutual respect, and the impact of spousal harmony on fatherhood? What do you think, Mr. Ricks?
Well, no, I don't think it's a cultural cliche. I think it's become a societal norm. And
in the American society? Yeah,
absolutely. And primarily, I can only speak, obviously, from the context of me being an American citizen. I haven't lived outside of the US of A. But what I do see is that this has become a mantra for conflict avoidance. It is not necessarily a indication of a healthy marriage. It is the man's avoidance of conflict or toxicity in a relationship. And the idea is that if I keep the wife happy, I can have a semblance of peace in my household. So therefore, I'm going to avoid any type of confrontation or things that could stir up an issue so that I do not upset my wife, because what's penultimate in our society is that the woman always maintains a level of comfortability and happiness so that the whole household can be happy. But I don't subscribe to that ideology.
I don't think that a woman can be happy. At least they're not happy for long. Eve wasn't even happy.
Well, I mean, I don't think people can be happy. Like happiness.
Well, I don't know. I
think we can carry joy and have moments of happiness, but I think happiness ultimately is part of an emotion that can be fleeting because sadness, happiness.
Okay, but so what I think about when it says a woman, if you buy a woman a diamond ring,
she's momentarily happy.
$1 million diamond ring.
Yeah. She'll overjoyed.
Be happy that day. She might be happy that week.
Yeah.
But next week, guess what?
Yeah.
She's not going to be happy.
Because I mean, it's
as men, we are more content. I believe this is my bias. My wife asked me, "Are you going to tell the truth on that vanity podcast?" Yeah. You going to just tell your opinion? Well, this is my opinion. My opinion is men are simple.
Yes.
We're simple. We're easier to satisfy than women, and women. You could buy them a house. They want a bigger house. They want another house. They want to redecorate the house. It's always something. Eve was not happy in the Garden of Eden, and she had everything.
Everything but one tree.
Right, and she needed to eat from that one tree.
You can, yeah. That is obviously a go-to example. However, I would say that the responsibility fell on the man because it was his inability.
Well, no doubt.
It was in his inability to stand up, and he chose appeasement over accountability. And I think that is the indictment for me in our society on men, that they tend to placate because they do not want to suffer the ire of their spouses.
Yeah, okay, I agree with that 100%. Yet and still, both are true in that the woman was not happy, but yet it was the man's responsibility to stand up to her, and he did not. He placated, and that's what we do now. And that's why we get this phrase in my mind, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Yeah. In fact, I was watching a court show once, and the woman was going off, and the judge asked, why are you doing this? What's wrong? And she said, well, you know what they say, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. She used that in court.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean...
How did we get here is the question, though. How did we get here, and is there a solution to it?
I believe, we're taught to be peaceful. Like, keep the peace.
Who's taught to be peaceful?
Well, this society, at least America, we taught in school not to hit each other. We taught, not saying that some of those rules ain't bad, right? But there's certain things we're taught.
What America did you grow up in?
We're taught to keep to ourselves.
What America did you grow up in?
In the classrooms. And mind you, I was the bad kid, always in trouble. I didn't subscribe to any of that, obviously. But point is that there's a level of care. There's a care that goes towards the ladies, right? And if you ask any man, I believe that if he wants for his wife to be happy.
Do you think wives were happy in the 1800s and 1700s and 1600s? Women were abused.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah, but we know history, though.
But what I'm saying, though,
yet today's woman, all of a sudden, we placate to her because her happiness is what dictates if the family is happy.
Right. But why? Well, because we said they were taught. Yeah. We were taught to treat a certain way, but not to be treated, and vice versa. But if you ask any man that is interested in a woman, what do we want? We want to make our women happy. None of us are out here just like, we want you to be miserable, right? Yeah. But oftentimes what you said, Byron, is no matter what we do, sometimes there's no pleasing, right? There's like an endless thirst. And when did that really increase? Was that more exposure to create like social media with the comparison narrative? Because I remember it was still there before that, but now it seems like there's more outspoken, more people speaking out against. How many women are looking at, we should leave? Because they said, I have the stat here, was it 80%? Anyway, a substantial amount of women file for divorce first because they're unhappy. It's
about 70 to 80% of divorces initiated by women. Yes.
Right. So you have that piece. And I heard somebody say this, I can't remember where or whatever, but it says that a woman will sacrifice her family for her happiness, whereas a man will sacrifice his happiness for his family.
Right. I have a friend right now who divorced her husband and regret it to this day. Mm-hmm. And
I know a couple too.
Her husband remarried, moved to a new city, and she was hurt and upset about it. And I was talking to my wife about it, and I said, what is she upset about? She divorced him. She said, well, she wished she hadn't done that.
See, I knew one of, I want to uncover this person, but I knew one that literally left their husband while he was at work, had trucks and everything, empty the house, left a picture in every room, and moved into a tiny little spot with too much furniture. But yet cried her eyes out when he remarried because that lady was stealing her husband. But she left.
Yeah, I mean, this is
because it's feelings.
Yeah, this is a problem. I mean, this is indicative to me of what you see, especially within the modern woman, right? Is this idea that, you know, I am independent, self-sufficient, not needing a man for anything, and the feminist mindset has taught women that they can be solely apart from a man without having any sort of necessity for male connection. So when they're not getting what they think they should be getting in a relationship, they abandon their relationship. But what happens is reality sets in and they recognize that what they're losing, that intimate connection, the friendship, the camaraderie, all those things were extremely valuable. And in the heat of emotion, when you're getting all these signals outside from society and culture that you can do better, and you realize that there's not better out there in the dating pool, the dating market is not what you thought it was going to be. Now there sets in this sense of regret. And I don't think that it's because they necessarily want to be back with the man. They are upset that somebody else has scooped up and taken what was once quote unquote theirs, and they don't have anything to replace that. That to me is the issue. Whereas men, we tend to have an ability to say, okay, well, if I'm no longer wanted or needed, we may fight initially for the woman, try to get her back, try to do kind of things to woo her. But once the ship is sailed, we tend to move on. And it's just a matter of fact that the as you said, you know, and I think we both said this, that men are far easier to satisfy and please. So we can find another woman to fill that place that gives us what we want for that season of life, and we can move on. Whereas the woman is still looking for something that is, quote unquote, in her mind, better than what she had before, but she's going to get out into the dating market and find that finding better is a low probability of success.
That's a big point, because there's a lot of, you know, trifling shows out there you can look at that go through and ask women's preferences, especially younger women, right? And they have built this, you know, high earner, really tall, like they build this idea of what the perfect man is. And then these guys statistically show them how, like, that's less than 1% of men. What you're looking for is less than 1% of men. So there's this disconnect to what's real and what's perception and all that. And then going to what you're saying with this divorce piece, right? I got some stats here that says that, because a lot of times that happens is women say that, oh, they're not emotionally available to me. They're not responsive, they're not sharing, they're not caring, whatever. So it says studies indicate that over 60% of women frequently engage in behaviors aimed at correcting or soothing their partner's emotional state, while only 50 to 55% of men find these interventions helpful. So, you know.
We find them annoying.
Right. Because soothing or correcting, you know, that's, when we think about another thing I'll pull, a lot of time it says that men don't share with their spouse by fear of, you know, rocking the boat, whatever. My feelings may upset her, and now she's mad at me for sharing.
But not only that, when we share, they use that against us later.
Yes.
Right? And I know I've had that happen to me. You guys been married as well, maybe you have. And so that's why men hold back, because when I put it out there and lay it out there, I don't want it used against me.
Yeah, because we say what we mean, they say what they feel. So if I'm telling you what I mean and you don't like it because it makes you feel bad, I can't control that, because this is my experience, and I'm sorry my experience makes you feel bad or is encroaching on your feelings. However, you're wanting to know what's wrong. I'm sharing with what's wrong. You don't like what's wrong. Now we're at odds. So a lot of men do clam up to stay away from that battle. Right. So that's where part of their mindset is like, if I keep the peace, then she's going to help with the happiness, right? Because nobody wants to fuss and fight and all that.
Well, that points me to the Rutgers University study. It says when wives are satisfied in the marriage, husbands are more likely to report being satisfied, even if they have unresolved issues. This suggests that emotional well-being in marriage is strongly tied to the wife's happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, again, we don't want to sit here and have a rag fest on women, right? Because men bear a large amount of the responsibility in the relationship.
What? Oh, okay, go ahead.
The relationship as it results to just kind of the relational dynamic.
That's true. We're just talking about women right now, though.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, but I think that's we can get caught in the where it's going to come across like we're just
bashing women.
Well, I think it's going to come across like that regardless.
Well, what I'm saying is that I don't want us to we want to have solutions and we want to be educational in that aspect. And so you can find plenty of podcasts. Just go listen to Fresh and Fit. They'll complain about women all day long. But I think that when you look at it, men bear a large part of the responsibility in the context of a marriage. And I say this, that the man is to be the thermostat and not a thermometer, right? And I had a wise man tell me that, is that we are supposed to be the one that sets the temperature of the house, okay? Not going and being fluctuating with the temperature. And a lot of times what we're doing is constantly asking our wives, are you okay? Is everything good? Are you okay? And there's times where we have to just say, no, I'm going to be stable. I'm not going to be beaten about by the waves of emotion by my wife. And I'm going to create a level of consistency and stability within the household. And I'm going to be steadfast in that commitment. And so a part of the natural instinct of a man is to provide and to care and to be a protector of his spouse. That's how the natural order should be. And so I think that this Rutgers study is speaking to that in a sense, not from the standpoint of, yes, let me placate just to create quote unquote happiness. But if I'm providing an environment where my spouse can feel secure, can feel a sense of peace in that household, by very nature as a man, that makes me feel peace. So I don't think that means that you should acquiesce to things that are principled in nature, but there needs to be definitely an awareness of the emotional nature of the woman, because we can't expect the women to be men. They're going to be emotional. We have to be steadfast in our balance of our emotional. And you teach this in emotional intelligence.
I think that's the most valid point with this, is that we know that they're going to be emotional, right? But yet we avoid. So we say we're just keeping the peace. I talk to a lot of men, do men's ministry and all that. I hear, I'm just trying to keep the peace in my house. Mm-hmm. And peace usually is established after some sort of conflict or a war, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So to keep from peace to me is a lie. You think that you're lying, being deceived, because you're keeping from conflict, which could make way to peace if handled correctly. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. It's
an armistice. Essentially, you're North and South Korea. There's a line of demarcation.
Right.
You've just agreed not to cross these borders, but you're not at peace.
You're not at peace.
There's still an armed conflict.
Because what if the borders are like you're using, North and South Korea? Think about what are the consequences of crossing some of those borders, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the thing, is where a lot of times we go into a home, and I'm not talking about we as men, I'm talking about the children too. And that's the piece that I hope, and I'm not bashing women, I want to bring awareness, because what I see is a lot of women are struggling with self-awareness and accountability, but yet they think, their perception is that they are, there. So if the children are also knowing how to read mommy's language, body language, attitude, things like that, then that means that there's a minefield in there. And then that means that mom or wife is the thermostat, because everybody's fluctuating based on what's going on in the environment. So how do we as men take control of that? And I don't say take control and sit down and do what I say, but because if you look at the Bible, right, it says that husbands, love your wives like Christ loved the church, willing to lay your lives down. But it also says, wives, submit unto your husbands. It's pointing out the areas that each gender struggles with. Women struggle submitting to leadership.
Well, they struggle with the word submit.
Right? Whereas men naturally submit. We fall in line with...
But we struggle with the word humility.
Right.
Being humble.
Humble. And
we perceive
love.
it as weak.
And in being loving, we're not natural, touchy, lovey-dovey people, right? That's just... I love you.
Yeah.
And so it's an intentionality, I believe, that we... through our love of our wife, which love can be tough sometimes, saying no. There's times I didn't say no, and I've had to pay for it, with debt, with whatever, throw it in the pot, right? Where I didn't put the boundary, because it's been a long week. Whatever, do what you want. I don't care. Because like you said, men are simple. I don't care. Like for me, feed my belly, do your other duties there, and just give me peace. Like I'm cool.
But shouldn't a wife be emotionally supportive as well?
I think so. That's one of my favorite things about Zig Ziglar was like his love of his wife. But he spoke on a woman that spoke on a woman that was ultra supportive.
Right.
He said, but I remember watching him get motivated seminars. I think it was his last time speaking. His daughter was up there guiding him because he's having short-term memory loss. And he'd get lost in what he was saying and he'd revert back to, I tell you what, if that redhead leave me, I'm going with her. And it just showed his love for her because of her love and support for him. And he gives her credit for helping speak life and build him up. And what I struggle with women nowadays is that we want you to speak life to us. We want you to be there. However, oftentimes you're not building us up. You're beating us down.
Interesting point. The Journal of Marriage and Family has a quote that says, men with emotionally supportive wives reported lower stress and better health outcomes. This reinforces the idea that emotional
reciprocity.
Thank you. Reciprocity isn't just nice, it's necessary. I love my wife to death, man. Yeah. We've been married, many years. And my wife is supportive most of the time. And to Brandon's point earlier, as men, what did you say? We are the thermostat?
Yeah, we are supposed to be
the thermometer.
Yes, exactly. Meaning, we set the temperature.
Right. So the thermometer, you check it, right?
Exactly.
Whereas the thermostat, you set it.
Exactly.
And so I have had to learn that when the temperature isn't right in my environment with my wife and my marriage, I now have to set that new temperature.
Yeah, exactly. And
I've learned that. And that came about the hard way, And
sometimes you got to turn that thing all the way up.
Or all the way down.
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, you got to set it precisely to where it needs to be
based on the environment that your marriage is in.
And then you might have to use that thermometer you were talking about to gauge it.
Right.
And then you might have to change it a little again.
And I think,
and that's our job. But I still ask the question: is it in a woman's DNA not to be happy for long?
I don't know. That seems like a catch question, in terms of the DNA aspect of it. What I will say is that I have a very wise brother in Christ of mine who taught, on this relational dynamic in a men's fellowship that I attend. And Jake had a great way of describing this. And he said that, the reason why, for example, women will come to us and want to provide innocuous details about a story and dive into the very specifics of a particular topic or subject, and we're just trying to, get to the conclusion, get to the end of it. What's the meat of it, right? And he mentioned this thing called the meta report that was very profound to me, and he said that if you look at the dynamic of men and women, men are responsible for the hunting, the primary provision, right? So they're going out. It's very, very black and white. I have to go and kill the buffalo, kill the gazelle, the deer, whatever else, right? There's a very tactical way about moving. It's very precise. Whereas the woman is going out in the meadow and gathering things for the household. She's gathering berries. She's going through the foliage. She's picking certain things, okay? And she has to be very cognizant of this mushroom has these spots on it. This one can kill you. This one's for food. This berry can be eaten. This one cannot.
The details.
Right? And so she wants to come home. When you come home from the hunt, it's very black and white. Did you kill it? I killed it. Right? Where she wants to say, no, let me tell you about the day. I went out and then I ran into this and then I saw this and I saw this.
Found some mushrooms. They're beautiful.
And these are that, right? And they want to give the meta report of what they saw in the field.
Yeah.
And what Jake said was that we have to be a lot more patient with our wives and be willing to listen to the meta report. A lot of times what we hear is just a lot of complaining. right? I came home from work and so-and-so was gossiping about so-and-so said this and so-and-so said that, but they're just giving the meta report. They don't want us to fix it. They don't want solutions to a problem. They just want an ear to listen to. I think that as men, we can do a better job of doing that. And I know for me personally, I have not done a good job doing that. I'm a very, very black and white, to the point kind of person like most men are. And we have different degrees and scales of that. But what I'm learning is that I need to just be an ear sometimes and listen.
That's major.
And that will quail a lot of that dissatisfaction.
We try to find a solution. We're solution finders, right?
Exactly.
You're presenting a problem. Okay, I got a solution. But they just want to hear, oh, that sucks.
They just want to, yeah, exactly. They just want to, and so what I've realized is that my wife, I'll have to ask now, say, okay, help me understand what you want from me here. Do you, and that has helped. It's like, am I just to be listening here? And she'll say, yeah, I just want you to listen. Okay, cool. Now I have an expectation of, I'm not going to give you an answer. I'm not going to give you a solution. I'm not going to tell you how to fix it or solve the problem.
I'm not going to make a face.
I'm just going to listen. And I'm going to say, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. That's wild. Man, how you feeling about that?
I have to say, line.
Okay. And then you know what? And then the thing passes, and the next hour she's talking about something else. She's showing me a TikTok and she's laughing. But when we don't acknowledge those things, that's when I think a lot of the problems from our end comes, and then we revert to the conflict avoidant, I just want peace. But we need to do a better job nurturing an environment to where the woman feels like she's in a place where she can feel safe, secure, and she can come and confide and give the meta report.
No, I agree with that.
Which leads us to this effect that you were talking about. Many men grow up without a model of healthy emotional expression, especially fatherless men. In marriage, this can lead to either shutdown or passive peacekeeping, which masquerades as happy wife, happy life, but actually avoids true connection.
What is this effect from, though, Byron, that you're mentioning here?
The emotional, what are you asking me?
Yeah, like where is this? Where are you pulling this side effect from? What is this from? Where's this coming from?
This is from the Searching for Dad book.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I didn't know that, so I don't know if the people know that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's coming from the Searching for my book I wrote.
Which side effect specifically?
Well, side effect number 3, emotional repression.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
but I think you're saying something, because I'll speak to this real quick. Single mother households, right? And I've been in there. My mom was a single mom, teenage mom at that.
Right.
And so I think that gives a unique blend. And as a disclaimer, I love my mother. It's all grace, it's love, it's forgiveness. I'm going to call a spade and not in the hopes to hurt her, right? But as a single mother, teenager who's not mentally developed all the way, right? And in the single mother piece, she'd get overwhelmed. So it's easy for me to, with my feelings, my problems, my issues, be told, no, stop, not right now. I got my own thing going on later. So it was a learned behavior for me to suppress and try to read at a better time. And so a lot of times we overwhelm them. The women anyway, especially if they're already having big feelings. Okay. So that's what I say. My mother, she's having big feelings. There was no space for my feelings as a kid.
So Byron, I have a question. So what you're saying is what you're implying here, I guess, from the research that you've done from your book, in terms of emotional repression, that men that are fathers, that grow without fathers, are more likely to experience issues in their marriage with understanding how to properly express their emotions with their spouse, which leads to them being conflict avoidant. Is that what you're saying here with this this side effect here?
I'm saying that yes. Definitive answer to that is yes. However, a boy can grow up with a father in-house. I've learned it still depends on the dynamics of the relationship that his father has with his mother. So a fatherless boy growing up fatherless, or one with a father, can have the same side effect.
Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm saying is, there disproportionately, do you think, I would surmise that there would be disproportionately more men that didn't grow up with a father present in the household, going into marriage would have issues.
That makes sense, though. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
I mean,
that makes sense, because they didn't have the experience of the role model.
Right. What I know is that in my household, we got a good balance when it comes to parenting, right? My wife can get overwhelmed, start tripping sometimes, just like I can. I get fussy. But having the freedom of both parents can kind of help call out the other one or go tend to the child. Mom's tripping, I can go speak to the boy, help there. If he's struggling with big feelings, so sometimes he's frustrated with me, sometimes he's frustrated with his mom, and I made it clear, like, you can come talk to us from a respectful manner, and helping him sort out those feelings. And sometimes it's just not being a kid. Like, you're a kid, you have responsibilities as a kid. And sometimes it is relevant and valid. Like, you know what, I can see how you could have taken what I said there as such. But I think a father helps regulate the processing of emotion, whereas mothers are more emotionally aware and in tune, right? So I think it's why having both and not having others, because what I've seen with my mother and even with my wife is the boundaries move based on their emotional place. Busy day at work, she has less, there's no grace here. Great day, oh yeah, pee on the carpet.
So then the wife's happiness is more important than the husband's.
More important than the husband's, and it can even trump the child's at times, because
I don't know. I disagree with that. I mean,
see,
I don't know if I don't know if I would quantify it as more or less. I think it's just different. I think that I don't know if happiness is the goal. I think that we are far too concerned, not just women, but in general in our culture, with happiness. We're obsessed with the concept of happiness. Happiness is not an entitlement. We're not owed or deserved happiness. Happiness is an emotion that comes and goes, like you mentioned earlier. It's fleeting. I think that the presence of joy is far more important.
Yeah.
I think that if you live in a household where you're taught that happiness is some sort of guarantee that you're entitled to, you're going to find yourself, when things are not happy, lashing out. But just in the nature of life, you're not going to be happy. But one of the things that I want to pull back to, Byron, is in this idea as we connect with Searching for Dad in the book, and some of the insights that you've pulled here in emotional oppression, identity, and conflict management. The thing that sticks out to me in this idea of emotional repression and bringing into the child dynamic is, do you think that what are the effects of a husband who is conflict avoiding, placating to the wife's emotions? What is the impact and effect of that on the children in that household?
Well, I think that whether you have children in a household or not, I think it sets up a false environment. It's not realistic environment. And as far as the kids, it's not a realistic environment. Also, it doesn't show the kids how to be a man, how to be an adult. It just shows them how to placate.
Yeah.
And that's what they learn.
How to get their way if it's like a girl in the house. If there's a female in the house and she sees this is working for mom, it may work for me too. It may affirm a poor behavior that may hurt her long down the road in marriage, when the husband may get tired of, oh, this is how it was in my house. It wasn't in my house. Well,
also, I've had talk to guys who grew up without their fathers, or with their fathers placating to their moms. And I remember I was in, they call it the Tri-Cities. It's Moline, Illinois, up in that area. They call it the Tri-Cities. I can't think of those other three cities.
In the Midwest, y'all, not Texas.
No, in the Midwest. In the Midwest.
I was in here thinking like...
no, it's Moline. No, and I was talking, and one of the problems he had was his father would placate and do all these things to make his mother happy. And so he would do those things with his women he was dating. Mm-hmm. Okay. And like you were saying earlier, that you had to learn how to say no. Sometimes it's hard to say no. Love does say no. We tend to believe that love doesn't say no sometimes. But because he didn't say no, he placated, because that's what he saw his father do to his mom, with his mom. And he placated with the women he dated. Well, they were not satisfied. Then he got saddened. He got upset. And then he couldn't even understand when they left him and went to others. And he said one woman called him weak. Mm-hmm. And he called himself satisfying her.
Yeah.
Meeting her needs.
Yeah.
And she said, no, you're a weak man. So that could come from that as well.
Right. I mean, but there's side effects to all of that, right? This is a spider crack. I know for a fact when I got married, I married a woman that, who mother and them, spoiled her. I just call it what it is.
We're taping this.
Right? Oh yeah, I've things I said
to all over the internet.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
right now.
Hey, authenticity, y'all know what it is.
It's gonna be on YouTube.
Man, I hope everybody sees it too. And that is, and I think that was part of it was, giving better than what the generation had before, right? Well, then I remember going out with my wife while we was dating, and she's like, I need to go shopping. All right, let's go. And man, I'm just seeing her buying everything. We was in Express. Y'all can give us a shout out later, Express. But man, she put everything in that store. One of everything almost, I feel like, on the card. And I wasn't tripping. Not my card, not my money. Well, 6 months later, we getting married, and I realized, whoa, what is all this? Oh, well, this card was when we went out shopping that day. And no, that was your card, right? But she was accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and I wasn't. And so when we got married, I tried to play into that because of the happy wife, happy life. I wanted her to be happy and fulfilled. Right. And like we do when we're dating, we say all the right things, we do all the right things. Because at the end of the day, we're looking for a specific goal. Right. If, some of those will feel what I'm saying. And so a lot of times in marriage, we continue that I want to give you everything you want because all I want is this, right? And then when we don't get that, we tend to pout like children. We tend to get upset. We tend to get passive. But I think it speaks to another level of rejection because we think in our minds, if I do all of these things for you, then you'll love and accept me and nurture and pour into me. But what we don't realize is that we're lacking boundaries, and women respond well to strong men. They respond well to security. Now I'm not saying shut it down, but there's finding that balance. But early marriage, I think
women like bad boys for some reason.
Yeah, and I'll be real. Yeah, we got married. And that bad boy started getting chiseled away with because of preferences. Yeah. Oh, so-and-so doesn't talk like that, but you talk this way. And then here I find myself years later, and she's struggling with attraction. Like, there's just something different. Well, yeah, you didn't smooth out all the rough edges that you liked. And it wasn't until I broke back to my authentic self, until I threw a grenade into my house, said, basically, boop, this. Like, it's either we fixing this the right way or we ain't doing this no more. Mm-hmm. That we had to have a big war, a long war, many battles. Yeah. But I stand here triumphant in the marital piece of that because I was willing to lose my marriage. It wasn't until I was willing to lose it, because what had me act that way, that had me pour into unhealthy patterns and behavior that were taking from me, and I didn't want to speak up on that, was the fear of losing the marriage, the fear of not sleeping under the same roof as my children, the fear of having to speak to my children about what's going on. But I realized that my children are watching their father go through hard times. They're maybe losing respect for me in the process. I've seen, there's times my daughter would give me a look and I could feel the look. Yeah. And it was like, dang, you ain't gonna do nothing? Like, you know what I'm saying? And that's when I had to adjust, like, man, if I really love my wife, and I really want this marriage to work, and it's not working for me, then it's not going to work for her, because eventually there's going to be resentment. There's going to be resentment, unforgiveness. I'm going to become callous, emotionally unavailable. A lot of the things that the women file divorce for, right? And so if I don't do this, then we have no hope. Right. And that's when I had to toss the grenade and start the war. Well.
Yeah, that's good. No, so it's good. So we talked about emotional repression, identity confusion, and Byron, you have I know you probably got some insight here, just in terms of like what how can we kind of conclude what we see here in terms of just a fatherless child or a man that grows up with no father, or maybe didn't have the right father model in the household. Mm-hmm. What insights do you kind of pull away from this?
Well, I know for me, growing up without a father in the house, that I knew all the things I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
And though I didn't, and so I worked on not being those things and being this over here.
So you made a choice.
I made a choice to be there for my son. You know, Brandon, he grew up with a mother and a father. You and I did not grow up with a mother and a father. He's the only one in here that grew up with both parents.
Oh, I believe we have, people behind the scenes.
Well, maybe.
So it's 50-50.
Shout out to.
I'm just.
Oh, I know. I just wanted to. For statistical purposes, in this room, it's a 50-50.
Right. Okay.
And in my household, it's 50-50.
Right. But you've also been a single father for a while. Right?
Yeah, so my daughter knows, even though she calls my wife mom, and she had like a 2-parent household, she didn't her whole life.
Right. But to answer Brandon's question, Brandon remembers growing up with me and my wife and I. We went through a lot. I mean, you've been married 46 years, man. You don't be married 46 years by accident, by mistake. No.
And that was a blended family as well.
Yeah, it was. And we broke up, and I came to get my stuff. I was at a hotel and I came to get my stuff, and Brandon looked at me. I remember he looked at me and he was like, "You might remember this. I don't know. You're a little boy. It's like, where are you going? And you live here.
Yeah.
And when I looked at him, it's like I felt like if I leave, kind of what you said earlier, I'm giving up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so I decided not to leave, and I said to my wife, I said, I tell you what, if we can't be together, give me my son.
So what you just said, what we said earlier, right?
Right.
Where I'll just say it from the man's point of view. A man will forsake his happiness for the happiness and well-being of his family.
Right.
Right. And that's what it sounds like it was. You looked into the eyes of a child, your family, and like, all right.
I said, I can't leave. I can't do to my son what my father did to me.
Yeah.
At that stage in the game.
Yeah.
And later my wife said, I should have let you take his ass. That's what
You know what? Goodness gracious. What's interesting to me is all of this is that what I recognize, obviously within the family dynamic, but there's also a larger societal issue that I think that's important to address, and it's one of boundaries and non-negotiables. I think that most people are not very good at setting boundaries and non-negotiables for themselves. And so what happens is when they get into a relationship and they haven't set those boundaries and non-negotiables, they become something that you learn and discover as you're doing it in real time.
So
right?
You're saying something. Oh my
right?
gosh.
So think about this, right? So if I come into a dating relationship and I have certain boundaries and non-negotiables, by the very nature of that, I'm eliminating a large pool of individuals that I could possibly be in a long-term relationship with. Right. But if I don't have those and I'm willing to acquiesce, I'm willing to bend, I'm willing to
see how it feels.
Yes, exactly. I'm willing to accommodate because I want to please somebody. Well, what happens when you come into a marriage and the emotional aspects of the phileo love, right? That emotional kind of love begins to kind of fade. You have to have something that's built on something stronger in terms of foundation than just a good feeling for somebody. Right. And what happens is now you recognize that, wait a minute, I am actually not tolerant of these things. But you didn't address those things at the beginning. And now you want to come and set a boundary that wasn't there before.
Right.
And so for those that are listening to this that are not yet married, when you're in those dating phases, be okay with asking the hard questions up front about how you live your life, what you believe, how you want to raise children,
right? So
that you can determine what those non-negotiables and what those boundaries are. And then it allows you to eliminate a lot of these hardships once you come into the marriage dynamic.
And there's an indicator on what, let me reverse. What you're saying is you have to know yourself first to know what your boundaries are. Right.
Yeah.
You know what you're
absolutely.
into. And we're oftentimes an indicator as people get into a relationship and they start taking on the interest and the some of the personality traits of who they're dating because it's new and it's exciting and they don't necessarily know who they are. So this feels great until it doesn't.
We are, as men, are geared towards giving the female what she wants or needs to get what we want. All right? Let's be honest.
Yeah.
As men, we want one thing early on. We may fall in love later.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe there's some love at first sight, and maybe women fall in love at first sight. Maybe men do too. I don't know. But most men that I know, it wasn't love that attracted them. It was a good-looking woman, and they wanted something from her.
Yep.
And I remember, and we talk about doing what women want to satisfy them. Not a big jazz guy, but meet this woman.
Oh, I love jazz.
Love jazz. You want to go to a jazz? It's a boring as heck to me. I don't want to do that, but I acquiesce.
Yeah, I know just the spot.
Right. I know just the spot, and I do that, and we get caught up in doing that, Brandon, as you said, instead of me being honest right there and saying,
yeah, I'm not a fan.
I'm not a big fan of jazz.
Yeah.
Right.
But you know what? I'll go with you if you want to go for this event.
Right.
But that's not something.
Yeah, you're establishing a boundary.
I'm establishing a boundary.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Because what happens is that we lose one of the core principles of human existence, which is the doctrine of free will, the ability to choose and do what you will to do. And what happens is when you feel like you're being forced to do something, when you have to do something out of that's obligatory, right? That's where resentment and bitterness builds.
Exactly.
And what happens with men in a marriage, typically, and women too as well, this happens with them as well. We can't leave them out in this regard. But both parties end up doing things that they lose bits of themselves in order to please the other person. Okay? Right. And it's now not something I'm doing in a sacrificial way out of service, out of love, but I'm doing it because I feel like I have to do it in order to maintain a relationship. And that's where you're going to have fissures and cracks in that relationship.
And I believe what you're saying, just everybody know, also it applies to intimate relationship. You know, and I'm not talking about sexual. I'm talking about just intimate. You see that in church with men's groups, a group of guys that pretend to like sports, but have no interest in sports because that's what gets them the connection. Right. So men, what you're saying is we will typically do what we have to do to get what we need, right? That connection, intimacy, the whatever. But if we don't know ourselves to know what our boundaries are, then we may fall into a dark space, a bad relationship.
When I was a young man, what was important to me was a piece of sex.
Yes.
Now it's a piece of mind.
A 2-piece and a piece of sex.
A 2-piece. That was just the churches of Popeyes. Where's this 2-piece coming from?
I mean, if you're in the Fort Worth, if you're in the funk, you want to hit Lisa's Chicken and Seafood.
but today,
is this Williams Chicken down the south? Where's the 2-piece coming from?
Today it's a piece of mind.
Yeah, piece of mind.
Piece of mind is vitally important to me, and I think that as you get older, it becomes more important. Yeah. But also, I have to understand that my wife, there's some practical tools as a husband that I have to understand that she needs. I have to learn, and if you're listening, we have to do weekly check-ins as men. We have to ask our wives, what do you need from me this week? Going back to what you were saying earlier, what do you need from me this week?
Yeah.
You know, secondly, speak her love language, even though it's not yours. What is her love language? Mine is one of giving. I'm a giver, which is perfect for us because my wife is a receiver.
Well, I want to say real quick while you sip that, on love language, also for people that have been married as long as you, has there been any changes in love languages in y'all as y'all have grown?
You know what? I don't know. I think I've always been a giver. Even when I took the love language test and that's what it came out, I wasn't shocked. You know, because as a kid, I've always been a giver.
Yeah.
I get a joy from giving.
Yeah.
Right? Number 3, share your emotional load. Be present, not just productive.
Yeah.
Right? Share your emotional load. As men, we have to learn to share that with our wives. You know? Ooh, that hit someone. That hit you, didn't it?
It was a story, a Bible story hit me real quick.
Okay.
Was it Mary and Martha? When Jesus was there and she's in there cooking and cleaning.
Yeah.
And he's like, yo.
You're not going to tell her to help me?
Right?
It's like, nobody told you to do all this work. You don't want to run around here like this.
Yeah. That work's going to be there. I'm not going to be here long.
But I think that was big. Be present.
Right.
Be present, not productive.
Right.
I'm not saying don't be productive, but you get it.
Exactly. Practical tool number 4. Don't fear healthy conflict. It's a path to deeper connection.
Yeah. This one I resonate with. this is really, really important. And I want to just double down on the importance of this for people, is that you have to be okay with conflict. We have so many people that are just afraid of any type of confrontation. Conflict is not bad. That's one thing.
It doesn't have to be bad.
Mm-hmm. No, not.
It can be bad.
It can be.
But so you said definitively it's not bad. It doesn't have to be bad.
No, conflict. What I'm saying is it's amoral. It doesn't have.
Okay.
You can't ascribe morality to it. Right?
Okay.
Right. So what I'm saying is that
I can go with that.
Yeah. So
you can push it either way.
Exactly. Right. So it's amoral in that regard. So when we avoid conflict, what we are doing actually is avoiding resolution and reconciliation.
Right.
Right. Because you have to have healthy conflict.
Right.
And that's one thing, in my household that we've tried to model with my kids, is that we will get into discussions, into disagreements, but at the end of it, it's a resolution. No one's allowed to just walk away. It's like, no, okay, don't stir the pot and then not have a solution to solve the problem that you raised.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so once we get to that, now there's a better understanding. And also too, you increase your ability to be resilient through difficult situations when you're able to overcome hard conversations.
So I think, just to clarify for certain people, there's a difference between conflict with the intent of solution and creating conflict just to air grievances. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's one of the things.
Called complaining.
Right. It's like, you can be, I'm confrontational in the sense of like, I want a resolution. Like I care. I think that things take too long. They can fester and become bigger. Right. So I can say I'm confrontational. Some people can say, oh, that's bad. If you're confrontational for the hell of being confrontational or combative. But if you're confrontational, meaning that I am one that I would like to seek out solution so that we can move forward, then that's when I say I'm confrontational, not seeking out problems. I'm not a troublemaker, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest thing with what you're saying right there is there has to be a solution in mind before. You don't just go kick off a battle with no solution, right? Or just looking to fuss and fight. And maybe that's a piece that we overlooked in this whole episode.
And also, to the fatherhood connection, what you guys just said, a strong, respectful marriage provides emotional stability for children. Kids feel secure when they see their parents navigating life as a team.
Yeah, that's so true.
Right?
That is so true.
So as a team.
You have that conflict.
This ain't one-on-one basketball.
You come together, and you work it out. And I have a call to action for you all this week. Anybody? This week, I want you all to be intentional. Ask your wife how she's really doing.
Yeah.
And listen, not to fix, but to understand.
Yeah.
Right? That small act may do more for your marriage than a dozen apologies.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. No, that's good. So I think in conclusion, right, happy wife, happy life. Is it a myth, right? Is it cliche? I think that we've identified as there's a bit of truth in that in terms of, yes, the household in general, we all can admit that it is better when your spouse is, let's not call it happy, but is at peace and feels loved, feels protected. Right. All right. But that doesn't mean that we placate as men. That doesn't mean that we acquiesce or we lose sight of principles, and we allow our boundaries to be usurped in order to maintain a false sense of happiness. And we are okay with conflict, and we are okay with coming to resolution. But at the end of the day, as men, we all want our wives to feel good and feel like they're secure, and that should be a goal.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, you have been listening to and watching The Father Factor with, I'm your host, Byron Ricks. Josh, any last words?
Hey, man, after this episode, any last words is kind of a good thing to end it on, right?
Right.
Yeah, say, any last words?
Shout out to our guy, Taurus, man. Taurus is holding it down. Camera department doing his thing.
Yes, absolutely. Shout out to him. You've been listening to The Father Factor. I'm your host, Byron Ricks. Remember, all your kids are equally yours. Until next time.